Hello and welcome to the collapse experiment. Is this picking me up? Is it? Is it? Sounds like it is. So, we are doing the Oklahoma City bombing series. I believe this is part 4 now. There is a playlist I've been putting together for these, but we are reading from the Medusa Files by Craig Roberts, who I'm pretty sure is no longer with us. But somebody was asking about Elohim City, well, specifically the ARA. And I did find a chapter on Elohim City, which I was reading the other day. And for those of you that were here for that, um, what ended up happening was I don't know if it was the light that I had added onto here in order to get this looking better, if that's a possibility. I don't know. Maybe I'm pretty enough. But I had a light that was attached to this plugged into the computer. And then I believe it was the charging cable wasn't properly um, plugged in, because all of a sudden I got a notice on my computer saying battery is low. I went to go make sure that was plugged in and stuff. And as soon as I played around with that cord, everything just went dead. So it's not a conspiracy. Hillary Clinton did not come visit me. Obviously, I'm here. So we are going to continue where I left off. And there is another chapter in here, Midwest Bank Robbers Connection or Diversion. That's going to be a separate video that I will get to. And I've got an awful lot in here highlighted in that. Yeah, I've got a lot in here highlighted. So there's a lot of good, interesting stuff in here. Karen Silkwood. Anybody familiar with that story? God. So anyways, where we left off was page 98. I did mark it. At this point, we must ask, who was Andreas Strassmeir? On July 14th, 1996, the McCurtain Gazette reported that according to a highly placed source in the FBI's intelligence division, he was a paid ATF informant or asset sent to infiltrate Elohim City. I do remember reading this, and I think it's funny that my computer just completely died towards the end of this. Let's wait and see if it happens again. Let's see here. The sentiment was echoed by Timothy McVeigh's lawyer, Stephen Jones, during a 1998 interview on KTOK radio in Oklahoma City. Jones said Strassmeir was a German national recruited by the FBI director, Louis Freeh, to do deep undercover and intelligence operations for the FBI in the United States. He also said that he discussed Strassmeir's FBI connection to the German government with U.S. prosecutor Beth Wilkinson. There is also an FBI Form 302, which has been unearthed, stating that Strassmeir was a CIA asset on loan from the German government. That makes 3 different agencies that have been mentioned, the FBI, the ATF, and the CIA, in relation to whom Strassmeir was working. Until our government is more forthcoming with information, we can't be certain of any other precise details other than he was a shared asset on loan to the U.S. government. Sounds like he's pretty much just a whore for the intelligence agency. After being outed by a Texas Light Infantry Brigade, Strassmeir, under the tutelage of attorney Clerk Leons, migrated to Elohim City, a 400-acre compound in rural Oklahoma near Muldrow. This enclave became, according to Time magazine, the who's who of the radical right because it housed members of the Aryan Republican Army, the Covenant Sword and Arm of the Lord, the National Alliance, the KKK, Aryan Nation, as well as many other militia and or neo-Nazi style groups. If you're hearing that in the background, that's our dogs. We've got a black 3-legged mutt and this other crazy puppy that my wife just got, who just doesn't leave anything alone. The Elohim City crowd is also prone to violence, as was revealed by Assistant U.S. Attorney Steve N. Snyder of Fort Smith, Kansas, who said that the plot was hatched as far back as 1983 to blow up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. The prime movers of this conspiracy were Richard Wayne Snell, James Ellison, and Carrie Noble. I feel like I've read, maybe it was this page over here that I left off, but let's keep going anyways. They wanted to use plastic explosives and rocket launchers to topple the building. The authorities took this plot seriously enough to raid Elohim City in 1985, where they were arrested Covenant founder James Ellison. Despite its notoriety, Carrie Noble, former Covenant member, said Elohim City is the potential down the road of being the most dangerous group in the country. It was never again raided. The big question was why. Yeah, the ATF actually wanted to raid it, and then the FBI said no. And this was like only a couple weeks before the Oklahoma City bombing. Even the FBI report called Project Megiddo addressed the phenomenon surrounding Elohim City-style compounds when they said that right-wing Christian terrorists pose the gravest threat to the country, would be the most likely to incite violence in the months and years ahead. Funny, they never saw BLM coming. To understand the mind-boggling sense of immunity that was given to Elohim City, we need to look at Robert Miller, who founded this community in 1973, despite his status as a Peter Rickle. What are these notes here? Who asked me in July 1995 if I had ever heard of or knew where Elohim City was. Testified on June 31st, 1997, that Miller was in regular contact with the agency in the years before the bombing. Miller actually confirmed these words on July 1st, 1997, when he told the Tulsa World newspaper that he repeatedly shared information with the FBI, DEA, and other law enforcement agencies. This is why the McCurtain Daily Gazette reported on July 1st, 1997, that Miller's position as a role for the FBI could explain why the compound has never been raided, despite its use as a hideout for gun runners, drug dealers, and bank robbers and suspected members of the conspiracy that bombed the Murrah building. Elohim City has enjoyed a reputation as a place where fugitives can live without fear of arrest. I think they're kind of selling it here as like a spa. Of the Elohim City residents, it is mind-boggling how many informants and outlaws were there. Robert Miller isn't the only individual at Elohim City who was speaking with the authorities. There were plenty of others, including James Ellison, former Covenant Sword and Arm of the Lord member who was married to Miller's granddaughter, who testified against the order. There's a movie coming out about them, if it hasn't already. I want to say it's April. Peter Langen. That's an interesting one. The son of retired U.S. Marine intelligence officer and leader of the Aryan Republican Army, after being arrested for robbing a Georgia Pizza Hut. I'm going to read that again. After being arrested for robbing a Georgia Pizza Hut, the U.S. Secret Service intervened and had him released. Pizza Hut. Who thinks of Pizza Hut? Okay. Gary Hunt, paid informant of the ATF, who was videotaped in the company of two other ATF agents at the Grand Continental Hotel in OKC a full week before the bombing. He was also videotaped along with a companion on April 19th, 1995 by an OKC television station right after the bombing. That's pretty interesting. Both men were carrying transmitters and walking rapidly from the Murrah building. Hunt was even videotaped as a pallbearer at the funeral of an ATF agent. Gary Hunt. Transmitters. I do remember somebody's pointing out that like either explosives in the building were set off first through transmitters, or they waited for the truck to go off and then used transmitters to detonate them. Dennis Mahon, former Grand Dragon of the Oklahoma KKK and high-ranking member of Tom Metzger's White Aryan Resistance, also known as WAR, and friend of Louis Beam of the Aryan Nation in Idaho. He was evidently also a paid informant to the Iraqis, according to his own admission, and never arrested or bothered by the FBI. I don't know why it is written this way, but yeah, paid informant to the Iraqis. Is that like a gang I don't know of, or is it actually like Iraq? That's kind of weird. Dennis Mahon. That is the heating system, because for some reason it's supposed to be in the 50s today, but it's like 32 degrees outside, and it's afternoon. So if that's happening, it's never when it'd be best suited, I swear to God. Andreas, the German Strassmeir, who according to research worked for CIA, ATF, military intelligence, German intelligence, and a shadowy group that McVeigh and Nichols belonged to that was, according to McVeigh, a special operation unit that did illegal things. PACON. He was a part of PACON. Under Larry Potts. When Strassmeir arrived in Elohim City, he talked Miller into letting him take over security. Then he took up all the deer rifles the residents had, sold them, and replaced them with assault rifles. That's unquote, because what the hell is an assault rifle? One source at Elohim City later stated that every few months, 15 to 30 individuals from around the U.S. would show up for a few weeks of military-style training. The recruits were primarily members of the Aryan Nation. One of them was Timothy McVeigh, who was a regular visitor to the compound. Peter Langen, known as Commander Pedro, vote for Pedro, who planned and executed 22 different bank robberies in 7 states that McVeigh was a part of, which netted over $250,000. This spree extended over 2 years, and explosives were used in many of the heists. Oddly, even though Langen was wanted in 6 states, there wasn't even one crime scene arrest or fatality at any of the robberies, and never did the robbers encounter any bank guards or law enforcement officials. Langen's also the very first person to fight for the right to transition in prison. That was Langen. It was his lawsuit because he didn't want to be Peter anymore and didn't want to have a Peter anymore and decided to get rid of his Peter. Yeah, that was Peter Langen back in 80s or 90s. He did that. I want to say it was the 90s. Peter Ward, the FBI informant and McVeigh's roommate at the Dreamland Motel in Kansas, when McVeigh rented the Ryder truck, Ward was probably the second man seen with McVeigh in the office of the motel and at the Ryder truck rental agency. Peter Ward. Michael Brusha, one of those suspected of being an actual bomb planner inside the Murrah building, was arrested on January 30th, 1997 in Philadelphia for his participation in a number of bank robberies. He moved to Elohim City in 1994 and was a roommate of Andreas Strassmeir. He was also at the Lady Godiva strip club with McVeigh and Strassmeir a couple days before the bombing. Brusha had also been identified as John Doe number 2 by Dennis Mahon, ATF informant Carol Howe, and Timothy McVeigh's girlfriend, Katina Lawson. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. It's funny. There's a story out there about how apparently McVeigh was like closet, but it came from like one guy, and it kind of sounded like one of those like trashy fantasy novels, except written for dudes that are into dudes. And the FBI kept interviewing this guy because they wanted like more juicy details. But anyways, Richard Guthrie. Guthrie, I believe, might have been John Doe number 2 that was in the truck with McVeigh. Either him or Brusha. I think both of them were in the truck at certain periods of time. Guthrie, the son of CIA parents and a Navy veteran. He was also arrested for bank robbery, but not before frequently visiting Tim McVeigh in Arizona when McVeigh was living near Michael Fortier. And actually, Michael Fortier, he reminds me a lot of somebody that I knew years ago. He looks a lot like this dude Jeremy I used to hang out with. Other shady characters of note were Michael Fortier, who Robert Miller admitted had lived in Elohim City shortly before the bombing, and Dennis Mahon, who are in the Order, which was founded by Robert Matthews, a self-proclaimed terrorist who burned to death during an intense firefight with approximately 75 federal law enforcement agents who surrounded his house in Whidbey Island near Freeland, Washington. Mahon then went on to become third in line in the White Aryan Resistance and was described by Andreas Strassmeir as a good friend. Equally important, Mahon admitted to meeting Timothy McVeigh several times and said that Michael Brusha was up to his buttocks in the Oklahoma City bombing. But Brusha was never charged with anything because, it was a lone wolf conspiracy with 3 people. The feds really need to work on that. Mahon had was also personal friends with Tom Metzger, founder of War and the Skinhead Movement, and former Grand Wizard of the KKK in the 1970s. In one of my memos written during the investigation, I wrote, oh boy, do I really want to go over these? A lot of this is just reiterating stuff that he already wrote, so I don't know why he did this. There were some official disinformation sources that say McVeigh had never even visited Elohim City, but we now know that McVeigh and Terry Nichols drove from Fayetteville, Arkansas to Elohim City to meet with Andreas Strassmeir on October 12th, 1993. So about a year and a half before. Also in attendance were bank robbers Richard Guthrie and Peter Commando Pedro Langen. We can also connect McVeigh to the Elohim City cadre. Good Lord. There's some words that you've heard, but you've just never seen them written out. Cadre through the following: a hotel receipt dated September 3rd, 1994, September 13th. Speeding ticket he received in 93, a few miles from the compound. Phone records: McVeigh called Strassmeir at Elohim City, April 5th. Prisoner interviews, his participation in military maneuvers directed by Strassmeir at Elohim City. Informant reports: Carol Howell directly linked McVeigh using the name Tim Tuttle to Strassmeir, Dennis Mahon, and Peter Ward at Elohim City. And Carol Howell, I remember she made a big fuss after the bombing. It was like, I kept telling them. I told them the building. I told them the date. I told them how they were going to do it. And the ATF was like, that bitch be crazy. With this information in mind, one can conclude that Timothy McVeigh was at Elohim City in the months and years before Oklahoma City bombing. On the other hand, to further link McVeigh to Elohim criminal element, FBI documents show that they strongly suspected McVeigh participating in a December 1994 Ohio bank robbery with some Aryan Nation members, including Michael Brusha, which this was recently confirmed with some documents that were given to Jesse Trenadu through FOIA just a couple weeks ago. This was on Twitter. And it showed that like the weeks after the bombing that they were looking into McVeigh's connection to bank robberies. And it's a funny note. So during the trial, McVeigh's sister is on the stand. She's testifying about how he gave her a couple $100 bills to launder through her new Jello wrestling job. I swear to God, this this is like a Coen movie, except the characters are already written. So when they were asking her like how he got the money, and she was like, well, I was told he might have robbed some banks, and he like turned to his lawyers and was like, I may have robbed some banks. And they were just sitting there like, this seems to make sense because McVeigh's sister testified later that he wanted her to launder some money for him in December 1994. This would also at least partially explain how McVeigh, with no job and a sporadic work record, would have the money to travel around the country, buy cases of the Turner Diaries, which he sold at rented gun show tables. And if my memory serves me correctly, I almost bought a copy at a gun show in Kalamazoo. It was the only gun show I'd ever gone to. Still, it's the only one I've ever gone to. And this guy was trying to get me to buy a copy of it. I was like 12 or 13 at the time. He was like, yeah, it's a really good book. And he was a young guy. I remember my stepdad talking to him, and the guy had said that he was over in Iraq. And of course, my stepdad, who was in the National Guard, was like, yeah, that guy's full of shit. And I'm just like, you're in the National Guard. Like, most people think you're full of shit. But anyways, more proof of McVeigh's Elohim City links come from a highly documented April 8th, 1995 event, a mere week and a half prior to the OKC bombing, at which McVeigh, Strassmeir, and Michael Brusha were videotaped by security cameras at Lady Godiva's strip joint in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Their visit was verified by the Fifth Estate, Canada's version of 60 Minutes. Of special note is McVeigh bragging to one of the dancers, I'm a very important man. You'll remember me the rest of your life. Actually, that's not even the quote. It's in quotes here, but he's like, on April 19th, you'll remember me for the rest of your life, is what he had told the dancer. And she was on video in the back room talking to another dancer, quoting him as saying that. So, of course, she was found dead later from an OD, but all the girls were like, she didn't do heroin. Come on, feds. Coke is the drug of choice for strippers. Get it right. In the parking lot was a yellow Ryder truck. The Tulsa Police Department, because nothing brings out the chicks like a yellow Ryder truck. The Tulsa Police Department had officers that, at the request of the local office of the FBI, had staked out a yellow Ryder truck at a Tulsa apartment complex that week. They later received information of the Godiva's encounter. At the night in question, there were 4 to 5 males at a table, including McVeigh, when one of the dancers, stage name Sean T. It's 2 words, Sean, and apparently you drink her because TEA, Sean T, also known as Sean T. Farron, spoke with them. A surveillance tape in the dressing room of the club, a copy which was provided to McCurtain County Gazette, reporter J.D. Cash, showed that at approximately 11 p.m., one of the girls was heard in the tape telling another woman in the room that one of her customers told her she would never forget him come April 19th. Cash went to the club and showed the dancer some pictures. When we showed her some pictures, she identified McVeigh, Brusha, and Strassmeir. I also heard that Sean T might have actually left with McVeigh that night. So the dancer was not identified, but if it was Sean T, she was found dead in her apartment a few weeks after the bombing. Though it was ruled a self-deletion, there was a note and empty pill bottles, which I studied the crime scene photos. I found what appeared to be a bloody handprint on one wall next to the patio doors. In my opinion, she was murdered and the scene was made to look like she took her own life. But to truly understand McVeigh's role in the OKC bombing, we need to dig even deeper. David Paul Hammer, sounds like a rap dude, who spent 23 months with McVeigh on death row in Terre Haute, Indiana. Terre Haute. Says that McVeigh told him about meeting with three shadowy men with close ties to the U.S. military shortly after he left the Army in 1991. McVeigh also added that these men only went by code names and that one of the meetings with someone known only as the Major took place at Camp McCall, which was on the grounds of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Could this once again be Vincent Petruski? Also, I received letters from an inmate in Supermax Federal Prison in Colorado who knew Nichols and who said that he swept out Nichols' cell when Nichols was in the yard by himself each day for exercise. He said he read a partial letter Nichols was writing to someone, and one sentence caught his eye. It said, "Sarge is going to take care of us." Again, a reference to someone military. Were the Major and Sarge part of a covert military op team as described by McVeigh? It gets weirder. At this meeting with the Major, McVeigh was told that he was passed over for a spot in the elite Army Special Forces so that he could be recruited into a black budget Department of Defense project where he would gather intelligence for the government on members of the radical right, including specifically the Aryans, KKK, and militias, like the groups that inhabited Elohim City. In effect, then McVeigh, like Strassmeir, would become a pseudo-agent for the United States government. I realize that such a scenario sounds fantastic, almost unbelievable, but in a letter that was read in 1995 before a grand jury, Timothy McVeigh's sister said he thought McVeigh was going into a special forces covert tactical unit to fight against evildoers. Author David Hoffman confirmed the sentiment in his book, The Oklahoma City Bombing and the Politics of Terror. I still have to read that. I do own a copy. McVeigh wrote his sister Jennifer while he was still in the Army, telling her that he had been picked for a highly specialized Special Forces covert tactical unit. Can they make these names any longer? That was involved in illegal activities. The letter was introduced to the federal grand jury, according to former grand jury Hoppy Heidelberg. These illegal activities included protecting drug shipments, eliminating the competition, and population control. I don't remember that being in the letter. Population control. The Associated Press also reported that the government had been closely monitoring those who came to show their support for the Branch Davidians prior to the Waco siege. McVeigh, of course, was in attendance, handing out anti-New World Order literature. Is Alex Jones there too? Maybe. Could it be that Timothy McVeigh had been sheep-dipped in the exact same manner as Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the JFK assassination? Those who have studied this subject know that former FBI agent Guy Bannister and CIA operative E. Howard Hunt made sure that Oswald was photographed handing out pro-Castro leaflets in New Orleans, and they even got him on a local television show to secure his connection, declaring, "I am a Marxist." Sounds like every freaking college idiot I meet these days. Could McVeigh also have been reinvented as a racist revolutionary who would play a Manchurian candidate role in some later Black Ops project? Before ruling out the possibility, let's return to another quote from David Hoffman's book. In an illuminating series of phone calls to Representative Charles Key, head of the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, an anonymous source stated that McVeigh was present at several meetings with ATF and DEA agents in the days immediately preceding the bombing. The meetings took place in Oklahoma City at different locations. The ostensible purpose of these meetings was to provide McVeigh with further instructions and to facilitate a payoff. David Hall of KPOC TV uncovered information that McVeigh had met with local ATF agent Alex McCauley in the McDonald's the night before the bombing. The ATF agent was seen handing McVeigh an envelope. Adding another element to the espionage angle is Terry Nichols' brother, James Nichols, he died a couple years ago, who in his book, Freedom's End, stated that McVeigh was met in prison by the notorious MK Ultra mind bender Dr. Jolyon West, who not only pronounced Jack Ruby insane after killing Lee Harvey Oswald, but also handled Sirhan following the Robert F. Kennedy assassination. Moreover, McVeigh also stated that he thought he'd been implanted with a computer microchip while serving in the Army, and many have declared that he was under the influence of mind-controlled drugs during his incarceration after the bombing. Dr. West worked for CIA Dirty Tricks Chief Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who headed the CIA's Technical Services Division in the 1960s and 70s. Gottlieb, who died in 1999, was head of the infamous MK Ultra mind control project that was designed to, among other things, program assassins and super soldiers. He also pioneered mind control experiments using LSD. A further insight into McVeigh's personality was provided by a woman named Lyndia Hanner Mell, who worked with McVeigh at Burns Security in early 1992. And I believe this was around the time that he was securing Calspan, another military tech conglomerate. Tim wasn't the type of person who could initiate action. He's very good if you said, Tim, watch this door. Don't let anyone through. The Tim I knew couldn't have masterminded something like the OKC bombing. It would have to have been someone who said, Tim, this is what you do. You drive the truck. All of this leads us once again back to Andreas Strassmeir, who admitted that he met Tim McVeigh in late spring of 1993 at a Tulsa gun show. That turned out to be bullshit. And he was in possession of McVeigh's Desert Storm military uniforms. This is not someone who merely enjoyed a passing acquaintance with McVeigh. Furthermore, ATF infiltrator, informant Carol Howell was unequivocally stated that Andreas Strassmeir was the OKC prime instigator of the bombing, and McVeigh was merely his protege. She also said that Strassmeir exerted extraordinary influence over McVeigh. Anyone familiar with the deep secrets of the OKC bombing realized that Carol Howell's role as an informant, along with her subsequent testimony, are the incriminating smoking guns that completely shred the government's credibility. For starters, official sources denied that Howell was even employed by them. But now, years later, we know that for a fact, Miss Howell's confidential informant number was, it's just a number. After being caught in this lie, the government said that Howell was dropped from their employment in June of 1995. That's still 2 months later after the OKC bombing. But an ATF report dated January 31st, 1996 stated it is required that her number be retained as an active informant. Plus, under cross-examination, Howe's superior, Angela Finley, admitted that Howe was an active informant until December 18th, 1996. We have further proof of Howe's status as an informant via the internal ATF documents, specifically Finley's preliminary report, which had an ATF investigation. Okay, so Howe was an informant, although they tried to deny it. Why? Because she warned them. Furthermore, on February 22nd, 1995, Ken Stratford, an Oklahoma Highway Patrol pilot who had flown photo missions over Elohim City, told Angela Finley that the FBI had an informant inside Elohim City in addition to Howell. True spy versus spy fashion, though, the ATF and FBI did not know of the other's existence or identity. In my opinion, the FBI informant was Dennis Mahon, as I felt sure the CIA informant was Strassmeir. What type of information did Howell feed to the ATF? To answer this question, we can start with ATF Special Agent Angela Finney's testimony on April 24th, 1997. Miss Howell told you about Strassmeir's threats to blow up the federal building, didn't she? Finley, in general, yes. That was before the OKC bombing. Yes. Now, Miss Howell actually took some of these people from Elohim City at your direction to Oklahoma City, didn't she? She went with them. She probably didn't drive. This trip to OKC by Elohim City residents occurred before the bombing, actually by a few weeks, didn't it? No, it would be months, in the fall of 1994. So, anyways, yeah, they even her handler is just like, yeah, she warned us under oath. And good God, some of these chapters. With the incriminating testimony in mind, let's cut to the chase. To begin with, in the months prior to the OKC bombing, Carol Howell submitted over 70 reports to Angela Finney, her BATF, not BFF, BATF control officer. She was also polygraphed at least a dozen times to check her reliability. Each time she passed with flying colors. Also, ATF reports describe Howell as a key witness along with being stable and capable. Why then didn't the ATF want Miss Howell's testimony to be heard? Because it killed the lone wolf argument. It all boils down to foreknowledge and direct complacency. Howell told her supervisors in no uncertain terms that Andreas Strassmeir and Dennis Mahon were primary instigators of the OKC bombing. She also reported that Strassmeir and Mahon made 3 trips to OKC to case various locations, one of them being the federal courthouse. One in November 1994. Okay, so the 3 trips. A few weeks before the bombing, Howell even accompanied them in one of these trips. Plus, these assertions were corroborated by Agent Finley under oath. The ATF knew that Strassmeir and other Aryan Republican Army members had discussed blowing up federal buildings in OKC. They knew that the Alfred P. Murrah building was a target just like it was in 1983. When other Elohim City residents plotted to destroy it, they knew that Timothy McVeigh and others had spoken of bombing the buildings because Carol Howell notified her superiors of this fact. Even Robert Miller, Elohim City founder, called for a preemptive strike against the government several months before April 19th. During Carol Howell's trial, yeah, because when you're an informant, they tend to bend you over, no lube. It's makes you not want to help the government. During Carol Howell's trial, ATF agent Finley testified that the FBI was as well as her agency had the information in advance of the bombing of the Murrah building. She also admitted that Howell warned them of bomb threats against federal buildings before April 19th, 1995. In addition, during her own trial, Carol Howell was asked by her lawyer, Tulsa attorney Clark Brewster, if she thought she had provided sufficient information for the ATF to conduct an investigation that would have confirmed the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building would take place. Howell answered yes. She is also quoted as saying, "It is the indisputable truth that the government had detailed prior knowledge of the plot to bomb the building, but somehow failed to stop it." Miss Howell's answers were confirmed by an event which took place on February 7th, 1995, which Angela Finney and other ATF agents flew with Oklahoma State Police Patrol pilot Ken Stafford over Elohim City to photograph and videotape the complex to gather intelligence for a possible raid to arrest Strassmeir and others. They were specifically targeting Strassmeir because Howell told ATF officials that he kept declaring, "It is time to go to war and it's time to start bombing federal buildings." For an investigator, the question about the statement would be, why would a German national want to become so involved in politics and violence in this country, unless he was working for someone else? This type of inflammatory rhetoric alarmed the authorities to such an extent that a raid was scheduled for February 1995. But in that same month, the invasion of Elohim City was scrubbed after senior members of the ATF, FBI, and U.S. Attorney's Office met. The ramifications of this decision cannot be overemphasized. As former Oklahoma State Representative Charles Key stated to World Net Daily on May 22nd, 2001, it's fair to speculate that the FBI got the ATF to call the raid off or told them to, or someone with higher authority did. He also added, if they had not called that raid off, it alone may have stopped the bombing of the Murrah building. How much the Elohim City crowd played into the actual events is questionable in lieu of other leads we followed, to be discussed later. However, the week before the bombing, the Tulsa office of the ATF had enough to arrest Strassmeir and put out a bolo, be on the lookout for Strassmeir to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. It should also be noted that the Immigration and Nationalization Service canceled the FBI's notice to detain Andreas Strassmeir, and that the State Department wouldn't assist in getting Germany's cooperation to question Strassmeir. He still lives there today. After the bombing, when he had returned to Germany, lastly, even though Carol Howell, who provided mountains of information to the ATF, urging them to raid the Elohim City arms bunker, and who was taken to the basement of the old PepsiCo building in the downtown Oklahoma City for debriefing only hours after the bombing, was prohibited from testifying at McVeigh's trial. The reason, Judge Rich Mattson said that her testimony might confuse the jurors. It would have killed the federal government's case because they didn't have one. Don't know why they took the route that they did, but during Terry Nichols' trial in Oklahoma, the following transcripts show relationships between Howell, Mahon, Strassmeir, and McVeigh at Elohim City. Carol Howell was being questioned by Nichols' defense attorney, Adam Tershwell, a well-known government-assigned defense lawyer. And there's a long back and forth. Yeah, she knows of them, okay? We get it. We have the evidence. Good God, how many more freaking pages? May have to be a part 3, or we could just stop at some point. U.S. Attorney Beth Wilkinson. It should be noted as a federal prosecutor that had a tendency to support the McVeigh-Nichols version of the lone gunman. God. In the case, even though reliable witnesses provided information of more individuals involved, her mission, it would appear, was to limit the investigation to just McVeigh and Nichols, which would lead to believe that others involved were being protected. If Mahon was working for the FBI and Howell was working for the ATF and Strassmeir was working for the CIA and the SPLC, and attorney Kurt Leons and a covert colonel at Fort Bragg, all at the same time, it would make sense to have Janet Reno's DOJ and Deputy Assistant Attorney General Jamie Gorelick control the scope of the prosecution. Gorelick has a very sordid past and was and still is a key supporter of Hillary and Bill Clinton. Of course they have to pop up. In 2005, American Free Press investigative reporter Victor Thorne, real name Scott Robert Makufka, wrote a 39-page expose booklet titled The OKC Bombing Elohim City Connection. Sadly, Victor, who I knew personally, was self-deleted in August 2016. APF had this to say. Prolific author, American Free Press writer, and seasoned Clinton researcher Victor Thorne Yeah, I guess that kind of, I mean, if you're a Clinton researcher, that's the way to go, I guess. Was founded at the top of a mountain near his home, the apparent victim of a boom boom wound. Family and some close friends contend Thorne took his own life on his birthday, August 1st. Thorne would have been 54. At the peak of his writing career, the author of some 20 books and 30 chapbooks, books with 75 or fewer pages. Oh, well, at least they explained it. Never heard the term chapbooks. Thorne had reported for his newspaper for over a decade, writing thousands of articles on myriad subjects from conspiracy to health-related topics, best known for his investigative research on the Clintons. Yeah, that will shorten your lifespan. Thorne wrote the Clinton Trilogy, 3 definitive works that delved into the history of the powerful couple, including their sordid scandals, Bill Clinton's sexual assaults of multiple women, and the drug running out of Mena, Arkansas, while Clinton was governor of the state. I did not have relations with them drug runners. The problem with the media reported self-deletion is that Victor Thorne had stated on many occasions that I will never, ever self-delete. If anything happens to me, it was murder. Conservative Post stated. Thorne was just 54 at the time of his death, and during a recent radio interview, he stated, "If I'm ever found dead, it was murder. I would never do that to myself." The most pressing question is at this point is why would those at the highest levels of government, all the way up to the Department of Justice, call off this raid? I don't know if there's really anything else in here to share. I mean, the chapter continues to go on. It questions the raid being shut down. Consider Strassmeir subject. Let's see here. Despite the preponderance of evidence, Joseph Hertzler, the chief prosecutor at Timothy McVeigh's trial, said at no time did the FBI consider Strassmeir a subject of the OKC bombing investigation. Let there be some BS. Mr. Hertzler had to have known this statement was untrue. On April 27, 1995, FBI Special Agent Hutzpeth made a background check on Andreas Strassmeir through German police intelligence. This report was eventually returned to the State Department's Counterterrorism Division, Office of Deputy Secretary of State Strobe Talbot. It must be understood that many good FBI agents who were trying to do a good investigation were not included in the compartmentalization cell of the FBI that was running the informants or participating in the cover-up of the facts of the bombing. Hence, a background check on Strassmeir by an FBI agent. During these crucial months when Strassmeir remained in the U.S., our government had time to review over 70 reports filed by informant Carol Howell, alone with 38 audio tapes and 2 videotapes. The source of these figures was ATF official Robert Sanders. And what was contained in Miss Howell's recordings and reports? The information pertaining to the identity of the Elohim City residents, those who visited the compound, and their organizational structure, family trees, telephone numbers, license plate numbers, explosives, guns, and even their tattoos. Gee, they seem to be really focused on the tattoo for John Doe number 2. Yet Elohim City was never raided once, even though the ATF and FBI knew that Dennis Mahon had been setting off 500-pound ANFO boom booms in the months before April 19th, 1995. Why didn't our government even question Mahon about his role in the OKC bombing? In addition, one release FBI document, which was obtained by Timothy McVeigh's attorney, stated there was evidence withheld by the government that another person could well have been the mastermind behind the event. That could have easily been referring to Andreas Strassmeir or someone even higher up than him, or it may have been McVeigh's covert action team commander. we would have to have the identity of McVeigh's handler until 2016. Yeah. Potts, Larry Potts. We also know that other relevant information was covered up after the bombing. Because of May 10th, 2001, the Department of Justice turned over 4,000 previously undisclosed FBI investigative documents. Furthermore, Chairman Dan Burton's House Government Reform Committee uncovered the whereabouts of numerous confiscated videotapes and photographs that most likely would have refuted the official version of events. These very same videos have also been cited by the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, yet the Department of Justice absolutely refuses to release them, even under the Freedom of Information Act. Though the FBI, ATF, and CIA were undeniably complicit in the OKC cover up, the ultimate responsibility leads directly to the doorsteps of Janet Reno. Ugly. Former President Bill Clinton and Miss Jamie Gorelick. Miller's family members at Elohim City were not the ultimate driving force behind the Oklahoma City bombing disaster on April 19th, 1995. Findings show that they were simply a cutout used to cover for much more sinister forces that controlled the players on stage at Elohim City. So that is the end of that chapter. And yes, I skipped 3 pages, kind of like a certain letter that somebody wrote. Next time I will cover the bank robbers. I believe that's what the title is. Midwest Bank Robbers, Connection or Diversion. And I'll go in more in Langan and Guthrie and Brescia and McVeigh, because they were all robbing banks together. I'm very interested to see what this movie is going to be like about the order, because some of the things that those guys did. Basically, if you've ever seen the movie Point Break, the precursor to Fast and Furious, where instead of cars, it was skydiving and surfing. Same exact plot. How about we just replace these things with cars, because people like cars, and we can have a big bald guy that's like, it's all about family. Yeah. So anyways, that's another edition of the OKC series I am doing. I'm going to switch up books after the next couple of videos, because I do want to read some parts of the Secret Lives of Bill Clinton. That is a very eye-opening book. It's got an interview with Strassmeir. It's got information about Carol Howe. Spoiler alert, Carol Howe and Strassmeir got it on. So yeah, I can understand why she would be pissed that she put in all this effort to get this information. They're like, nah, it's fine. She's like, no, it's not. You have no idea. Yeah. So, anyways, more videos coming up. Secret Lives of Bill Clinton. I also want to dig out In Bad Company, which is again about the order and the ARA, and a lot more detail about those guys. And I basically have every book about OKC except for maybe 2 or 3 that are so obscure. I'm waiting on thrift books. If it pops up, I'll buy it. Like when I got the Hoffman book, I think it was like 30 or 40 bucks. Bought it. Finally arrived. For some reason, whenever I order books about the OKC event, 9 times out of 10, they do not get to my house. It's either they can't find it, um, it's shipped and just never arrives. In one case, the UPS guy came to the door and he was like, "Bag's empty." That was the first time I tried to buy the Hoffman book. I tried 3 times to buy that book, and, oh, sorry, German. 3 times to buy that book, and it was finally the 3rd time with Thrift Books. It was the 2nd time on Thrift Books. First time I tried buying it was eBay. Yeah, and they just never arrived. So, eventually, I got some of these things, but, yeah. There's still two more that I can think of that I still need. I don't have the David Paul Hammer book either. So actually there's a few I don't particularly have. But anyways, that's it for me today. Going about an hour again. Hope everyone is doing well. Keep on typing.